Hey, Chipola Nation, I'm Rob,
I'm Smitty.
and we want to welcome you to the fifth quarter podcast. So glad to be back with you. As always, the website, be sure to check it out. It should be in the bottom left as you're facing the screen. It should be right here. Be sure to check out chipola.edu if you're interested in going back to school, further in your education, or the likes of. And we also want to take this opportunity to thank Chipola's awesome media team for the work they do in making this podcast a success. And as always, be sure to check out our other podcast, Tech Over Coffee, that airs on Thursdays with Jib and Jeremy as part of our business and technology department. Smitty, football season has finally come to an end, my friend. The Super Bowl was last night. Why don't you kick us off and recap Super Bowl 56?
Well, it was a tough battle in the beginning, and then the second half it was a slug out trench warfare against the Bengals and the Rams. But eventually, the Rams defense pulled it off for them, beating the Cincinnati Bengals for the Super Bowl 23-20. And a lot of great highlights over there.
Yeah, two good teams, Smitty. I mean, there's not really much separation. So for what we got to dissect today, I'm looking here at total yardage. There was only about, there wasn't even maybe 8 yards difference in the total yardage. Cincinnati with 305 total yards to LA's 313 total yards. I mean, there really wasn't much separation in this game. I watched that whole Super Bowl from start to finish. Defense really played a huge factor in, Cincinnati on the offensive side of the ball. Those first couple of drives were shaky. Of course, Burrow's never been to the Super Bowl, so
Neither was Matthew Stafford.
Right. So, but when you compare the two, as I talked about on our last episode, you got a 12-year veteran versus a guy working on finishing up his sophomore year in the league.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a difference at the big stage. And, there wasn't much separation as far as the defense was concerned. I thought both teams played great. Maybe some questionable calls there at the end, Smitty, even though neither one of us had a dog in the fight. We were both pulling for, I think, the Bengals, the underdog.
Right.
But as was the rest of America. But, LA getting the job done, winning 23-20. Smitty, what would you say was the driving factor on the final play of the game? I mean, even though they ended up winning by 3 points, what would you say pushed LA over the hump to win their probably, second Super Bowl title in years?
Well, hands down, it's got to be defense. Yeah. That defense was pretty stacked with, especially Von Miller, Aaron Donald with that game-clinching sack on Joe Burrow, along with a few other like Cam Akers and so forth. They all played a key role in solidifying that, hey, we came to play. You're going to get points. You're going to go through us.
Yeah, and it's funny that you talk about that last sack where Aaron Donald kind of sealed the deal. Somebody took a picture from, I want to say it was the Rams sideline, but it was up in the stands, kind of elevated, and they showed it from an angle where just before Aaron Donald had sacked Burrow, I don't know if it was, I think it was Jamar Chase.
I know which one you're talking about, yes.
Jamar Chase, apparently his footwork, set, it was complete. He exploded off the ball and had Jalen Ramsey beat for he's probably 2 or 3 seconds ahead of him. I think Ramsey ended up losing his footing, falling. If Burrow would have had maybe 2 or 3 more seconds to throw that ball, we could be talking about the Cincinnati Bengals completing the most terrific comeback, in my opinion, in Super Bowl history.
Which boils down to the shortcomings of the Bengals. You got to have an offensive line. That was their kryptonite throughout the entire season for some of the games, especially during the games against I want to say the Kansas City Chiefs and so forth, because they didn't really have that great of an O-line.
No.
And now you know why Joe Burrow didn't do so much in the freshman year.
I mean, he done what he could, Smitty. Yes. I would say overall Cincinnati played a lot better than I thought they were going to play.
Oh, yeah, most definitely.
Because I was kind of more or less expecting a blowout. But, the Bengals hung in there for at least 4 quarters. But, and this goes back to what I've said in previous episodes on this podcast, either whether it be recent or a year ago. Just because you have the lead does not mean you get to slack off, and this is at any level. This is not just the pro level. This is high school, college. It don't matter. This generation of players today, some of them seem to think, well, we got the lead, we can coast. You can't do that on a team that has it all right up here. They may be down on the scoreboard, but if they still have this in check, you'll see that drive where circumstances begin to shift with a minute and 20-something seconds or however much was left on the clock at the end of the game. And Matt Stafford got a drive going, His whole teammates got on the same page. They drove down the field. They got inside the red zone. Yeah, it took them 2 or 3 drives as far as plays to score, but they found a way to score nonetheless. And I think Cincinnati just let off the gas there in the end, and it ended up costing them. Now, let's be fair. Eli Apple, he's a decent cornerback, but, he's young. He's still got a lot of growth in him and a lot of work to do. And, Smitty, it's really tough because now you wonder, is Cincinnati going to make it back there next year? Most teams, statistically, that go to the Super Bowl one year, even if they lose it, it's very difficult for them to turn around and make it all the way back to the Super Bowl again. You look at the San Francisco 49ers in 2020 facing the Chiefs. George Kittle said, at the end of the game, I will be back here. They haven't been back since. You look at the Kansas City Chiefs. They won the Super Bowl that year. They go back the next year but end up losing to the Bucs.
Yep.
And then they try to turn around and mount another drive the next season to make another run, and they fall short in the AFC Championship game. Are we potentially going to see, Smitty, the same fate with the Cincinnati Bengals team? Or do you think in the offseason they go after some solid offensive linemen and say, hey, Bengals, let's run it back next year. Let's try to win us a ring?
They have the capability of mounting a repeat of going to the Super Bowl. There's no doubt about it. They have that. They have the tools. They have the personnel, and they have the staff.
Right.
They also have that motivation because usually a Super Bowl loss tends to be a great motivation to bring them back forth and say, "Hey, let's get this done." But they got to make some. They got to make some changes. They got to draft people to upgrade that O-line. They got to draft people to get some more weapons out there.
Yeah.
Not to say that the receivers and tight ends were top notch. Were not top notch, far from it. But they need to get more versatile with their attack, with their offensive attack. And for defense, they've actually showed up quite a bit. I was actually kind of surprised on the defensive end of Cincinnati Bengals, but you got to get new corners. I'm sorry. Eli Apple, you got toasted. Get out of here.
Yeah, got toasted, and it showed. And as far as the passing yards, I think LA racked up 270 passing yards on them, and Cooper Kupp, LA's wide receiver, OBJ going down. What was it? Halfway through the second quarter in the first half, going down with that aggravating ACL injury. I think he tore it.
Yeah, that was bad. I'm not a big Odell fan, especially when he was in the New York Giants and the Cleveland Browns. But just to see any kind of athlete go through that kind of pain during the biggest game of the season, the biggest game of your career in the NFL, that daggers.
Yeah, but apparently it didn't faze LA too much because Cooper Kupp,
there's a reason why he got the MVP.
Right, there is a reason. He stepped up, made the plays when he needed to. So OBJ going down really wasn't that much of a shock for the Rams. And I thought when OBJ got out, I thought that's it. I remember texting you saying Cincinnati smells blood in the water. I'm thinking if Cincinnati doesn't let off the gas and they find a way to not squander drives on 3 and out, punt the ball back, Cincinnati could potentially win their first Super Bowl in franchise history.
Right.
But there at the end, Sean McVay started playing a little risky, on like 4th and 1, 4th and 2, instead of traditionally punting the ball away and trying to salvage what he could of what was left of this game.
Yeah,
he just said, look, let's go for it.
But in his defense, in the biggest game at all, where there are no second chances, you don't want to risk having Joe Burrow have the ball. That's the same mindset that you have against Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
Do not give them more time on the clock.
Well, this is true, but I would also like to point out that, the way the defense was playing there towards the end, I probably would have cashed in all my chips on the defense because it showed. They drive down the field and they score, so it obviously paid off. But then Aaron Donald stepped up and made that game-ending sack on Joe Burrow. And I'm telling you, Smitty, if Joe would have had maybe just 2 to 3 more seconds in that pocket,
we could have having a completely different outcome.
A whole different conversation. And I'd say that to the fans. Like anybody in public that would debate this game with us, we would probably tell you the same thing is Joe Burrow had about 2 or 3 more seconds. Jamar Chase had Jalen Ramsey beat. And the funny thing is when you go back,
he was already on the ground half the time.
Right. And when you go back and look at the photo that was showed, wasn't Photoshopped, of course. When you go back and look at the photo, there was no safety help. So when Jalen was down, You know, Smitty, he had
Yeah.
all that green.
Yeah, it was a blitz call.
I'm talking about it was all that green right in front of him. So when you don't have any safety help over the top, as long as Burrow gets that ball where it needs to go, Jamar Chase can make the catch. It would have been, he could have walked into the end zone and nobody would have touched him. But you know, sometimes you take the risk and it doesn't always pay off. So congratulations to LA for winning your second Super Bowl in franchise history. No, I was not pulling for you, nor will I ever. But you know, Smitty, you know, do we want to go ahead and take the odds or state the odds, if you will, about Cincinnati making it back next year?
I say it's way too early. I honestly want to see what the NFL draft turns out. I really want to see if they're going to make any free agency decisions as well.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with the cap space or cap deficit that they have, but I guarantee you, with Joe Burrow and the receivers and the talent they have on both sides and special teams, let's not forget them. They make some good plays too. Show love to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they have the foundation to build upon a new team in the next season to go back to the Super Bowl. But that being said, anything can happen.
Right. And
and this season clearly shows that.
Right. And it begs the question, you know, we're sitting here talking about an offensive line being the difference maker. What I would say to the fan watching this podcast right now is the price tag too high for Cincinnati to go out and get them some offensive linemen? Now, you may be watching right now, and you may be looking right at me at the screen, and you may be saying, what are you talking about? They had basically a mediocre, subpar offensive line, and they still made it to the Super Bowl. However, that same subpar, mediocre offensive line that you're talking about they got to the Super Bowl also costed them a ring. We're talking about the difference of maybe 2 to 3 seconds if each man could have held his block. Now, granted, in the first half, they were finding ways to frustrate Aaron Donald. You know, they were double teaming him when they had to. The center, you know, was able to free up and double team Aaron Donald on the block because you just about have to, because he's a brute strength, you know, from the chest up. I mean, he's a really hard guy.
And let's not dismiss the defense. The Cincinnati defense did make some great plays.
Absolutely.
I mean, they intercepted twice against Matthew Stafford.
Yeah.
I mean, you would think that was like, oh, that's a chop block to the face.
Yeah, and I would like to point out Burrow threw no interceptions on the biggest stage of them all. Sophomore year, he was very poised. Granted, he didn't win the game, but you still have to give credit where it is due. He played his heart out. I think he wanted to win that more than anything else.
And there was a potential point in the game where he could have been out with a similar injury that cost him a half a season previous.
Yep, and I know exactly what you're talking about. It was the one where they hit him in the leg. I think it was a late hit, or maybe just somebody fell the wrong way, because I remember him walking to the sideline waving off the trainers. So the trainers didn't even get up to him to ask him what was wrong. He waved them off. I mean, he just needed to sit, kind of rest. They were already going to punt the ball. I think it was like 4th and forever.
I think it was a third down play.
Oh,
that
definitely.
was for sure a 3rd and long, and it was just. I mean, the blitz did him in on that play, and that just clearly shows. The first half, the defense and the Rams were kind of frustrated, like you said.
Right.
But the second half, they made those adjustments.
Yep.
And it also goes to show you on the Rams coach, Sean McVay. Mm-hmm. He learned his lessons in the last time he was in the Super Bowl. Granted, he was against the Empire, the Patriots, with Bill Belichick, and that was such a low-hanging fruit.
Sound effects, man. We need sound effects to beef up the podcast.
Do I look like I have a soundboard with me? Shut up. Anyway, but Sean McVay had to go against Bill Belichick and Tom Brady of all people, and
this is true.
The outcome was like 13-3. It was like the lowest scoring Super Bowl.
Yep.
But he's like, okay, I'm here. We're not making the same mistakes. No overthinking. No drastic change-ups. Mm-hmm. Stick to the plan.
Right.
Stick to your players, your playmakers, and go out there and get the job done, which he did. It clearly shows.
And I'm going to go ahead and throw this out there. This may be my opinion. I say L.A. does not make it back to the Super Bowl. There's already talk of McVay hanging it up. as a coach.
What?
Yes, there was an article today where McVay had done an interview and said he would carefully consider going ahead and retiring now that he's won a ring. He's kind of established himself. And Aaron Donald said, even in a pregame interview before the Super Bowl started, that if they win one, this might be the perfect setting for him to ride off into the sunset now that he's won a Super Bowl and retire. And I'm going ahead and tell you right now, Smitty, Aaron Donald, should he step down and retire, which he very well could, because we've seen some of them carve out a 10-year career or an 8-9-year career and call it quits after some of them win a ring. If he does that, a cornerstone key piece of their defense is going to be gone, and that's going to be some big shoes to fill. I don't think LA's got the strength to make it back, to run it back another year. They cashed in and it paid off this year, but the longevity of the roster that they've created, can it hold up over time? You look at OBJ. They went after OBJ, got him, and now he's already re-aggravated that previous ACL injury. Could we potentially see him cut ties? You look at Jalen Ramsey. How much more does he have in him? He's got a ring. Could we see Jalen Ramsey potentially make an exit after finally winning a ring? You know, he's already got a national championship ring with the FSU Seminoles, which in my opinion, the 2013 Florida State Seminoles will be the greatest college football team of all time. That's just I'm sure you wouldn't disagree.
I'd say not the best of all time. I'd say in the top 5.
I would definitely compare them to the 1999 Florida State Seminole team that went wire to wire.
Ooh, that's
Chris Weinke, Peter Warwick, those guys. I mean, it's hard to argue with that.
That's true, yes.
Anyway,
yes.
that's another topic for another time.
Yes.
What I'm simply saying is I say LA does not run it back next year. Cincinnati could potentially make the run. The door is open. But we're going to see, like going into this offseason, there's going to be a lot of questions, Smitty, and this is what I want to present to the fans of the podcast. You take your favorite team, insert your favorite team here, wherever you want to. Look at the greatest offensive needs or defensive needs, whatever the greatest need is. And you have to ask yourself, does the front office care enough to pay whatever the price tag says to potentially make another Super Bowl run? There was a time when Dolphins fans, and we'll get to that in a minute, I'm kind of segueing over into the next part. There was a time when Dolphins fans thought that was part of the process. You know, them hiring Mike McDaniel, the 49ers offensive coordinator, sat up under Kyle Shanahan. You know, there's talk that he's a real smart X's and O's guy, and that's great. I am happy for the Finns on that. But the problem is being a smart X's and O's guy doesn't always translate well with other players. Now, Tua's excited to be coming back. He said there's not another coach he'd rather play for. But Miami needs an offensive line. We have established that Cincinnati Bengals need an offensive line. There's about 2 or 3 other teams, Smitty, that need an offensive line. An offensive lineman, a good one, you might can get 10 solid years out of him. Maybe 12, 13, I dare say 15, depending upon how healthy you can keep him. Offensive linemen, I would dare say that the highest turnover rate or highest turnover position in the NFL, I would argue, would be linemen, because they are not built for longevity, much like running backs. You know, you can get about 10 solid good years out of a running back. There's only so many licks he can take before his body bears the brunt of the punishment.
You know, that's a fair argument. I mean, quarterbacks, they take a punishment every now and then, but I mean, you look at Tom Brady, I forgot Matthew Stafford, and all the other quarterbacks in the seasons in the NFL right now. I mean, they've been there for quite a while, except for a few of the rookies.
Right.
But the linemen, those change like almost every other season on some points. They come and go. They go back to like the backups or like the training practice squads and so forth. But I'm only saying that from my fan experience, from just watching the seasons every consecutively and all that. I'm not deeply into the statistical aspects of the NFL. I want to try to, especially for the next season coming up. But I can see the argument made for that.
Yeah. So, Smitty, kind of segueing over to our next topic, because I see we got about 10 minutes left or so. Have you found a team that you think you want to root for in the 2022 season?
Honestly, no.
No?
I'm kind of back at the drawing board, especially after what happened at the Super Bowl and so forth.
And it would be fair for me to assume that what's going to factor into your decision is, will the organization do what it takes to get a team in place, keep a team in place, and everybody get on the same page, try to go win some football games, make some playoff appearances, and potentially win a few Super Bowls?
Well, my gut's telling me to stick with the Florida team. But the fan in me is saying go to like either like the Bengals with Joe Burrow and that success story in the making.
Right.
It is far from over.
Right.
I think Cincinnati's got a good franchise quarterback.
Absolutely.
In the works.
Right,
I mean,
absolutely.
if it isn't in the works now,
Right.
basically.
All right, and nobody can argue that. I mean, this is how I look at it because I'm a fan of all three of the Florida teams. I haven't been able to make up my mind on rooting for a particular NFL team, and I get a lot of flack for that. I could care less. We're avid sports fans. We love the sport. We appreciate the sport of football.
We like the game.
Right, we like the game itself, and it's kind of hard to find an identity. So I figured, Smitty, we'd kind of get into our next topic. I think I have found a team that I want to get behind. But before I do that, I just want to kind of explain to the fans at home, well, you were a Dolphins fan, and then there was at one point on this podcast you were a Tampa Bay Bucks fan. I like all of the Florida teams. I respect them. I mean, Florida is my home state. But it's kind of difficult to stick with one team when you don't feel like you can really find your identity in a team. So I would like to offer maybe a few key reasons why it's kind of difficult to root for the Florida teams. Let's start with the Dolphins. I don't have anything necessarily on Tampa Bay or Jacksonville. You look in the last 20 years, Smitty. Let's just go through these really quick. The Dolphins in 2002 they went 9-7, missed the playoffs. They missed the playoffs for probably 5 straight years. Their worst record was 1-15 in 2007. They missed the playoffs from 2002 to 2007. 2008 they went 11-5 and lost in the wild card round. Now you would think after that 2008 season going 11-5, okay, you've got some momentum that the Miami Dolphins organization would keep moving forward. And this is no shade or disrespect to the lifelong fans since the late 60s when they got started and all through the decades. But after that, Smitty, in 2009 and 2010, they finished 7-9 both of those years and missed the playoffs. Their lowest record of basically the 2010s started with the 7-9 in 2010. Then they went 6-10 in 2011. 7-9 in 2012, 8-8 in 2013, breaking 500. Doing the same thing again in 2014, finishing 6-10 in 2015, missed the playoffs. Now, in 2016, Smitty, they went 10-6, lost to the wild card round again, and then turn around and go 6-10 in 2017, 7-9 in 2018, and then you look at from 2019 to 2021. They had 5-11 in 2019, 10-6 in 2020, being their best year during the COVID year, but still missed the playoffs.
Right.
And then in 2021, obviously finishing 9-8, firing Brian Flores after he's finishing his third year in the league. Had 2 successful seasons out of 3. You fire the guy. I remember him hiring Philbin back in 2014. They've been through a host of coaches over the years.
Right.
And it's evident, if some of the fans can't see it now, well, I'm sorry, I don't know what else to tell you. But it's become evident that the Miami Dolphins organization is so disorganized to the point that it doesn't matter what kind of coach you bring in, if the front office and the coaching staff can't get on the same page and they can't connect well with players, then it's going to be kind of hard to convince some of the fans to stick with it. Now, this Mike McDaniel they brought in from the 49ers, he is a player's coach. Watched his press conference last weekend. Very impressionable guy, very smart with the X's and O's. Do I think he could lead Miami in the right direction? Sure. Do I think he can win them to a Super Bowl? That's a stretch. Somebody say, well, the Dolphins have the highest cap space in the league going into 2022. Yeah, well, the coaching staff doesn't really handle a lot of that. That's the front office, the GM, Chris Greer. And there's a lot of fans that have been fans of the Miami Dolphins for a long time, Smitty, that argue Chris Greer is one of the many problems with that organization. So it's kind of hard to root for an organization that's not willing to cash in. They've given up players like Jarvis Landry, Wes Welker. And I'm not even going to talk about, Smitty, the rumor where supposedly in the offseason, which was 2020, Tom Brady had left New England. And Stephen Ross called Brian Flores at the time and said, hey, come meet me on my yacht. Let's have dinner. Let's talk about an unnamed quarterback that potentially wants to join us. Guess who that quarterback was, Smitty? Tom Brady. Tom Brady was on the yacht.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah, Brian Flores shows up, sees Tom Brady, and says, no, we're not tampering. We're not doing any of that. And what was crazy was a lot of people say, oh, that was a bogus story. Nobody's going to believe that. Tom Brady bought a mansion in Miami. So what does that tell you, Smitty? I think he was getting ready to cash in to go to the Miami Dolphins because they had talent. They needed to put a few key pieces in place. And because one guy says, no, we're not tampering, or whatever he calls it, he blew an opportunity for Miami to potentially win a few Super Bowls because they had the pieces in place.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you fast forward to where we are now, Smitty. They finished in 9-8. That coach is fired. They've now hired a new one, and he talks about how it's his dream job. That's great. I seem to remember a coach at the collegiate level that came to Florida State one time that said it was his dream job to work here, and they ended up letting him go after 2 seasons. He didn't even get to finish halfway through his second season. You know who I'm talking about. Don't even need to say his name.
Yeah, he's not going to be named.
Yeah, he's not going to be named, but you know exactly who I'm talking about. So what gives fans of the Dolphins any reason to believe in this coach? Because he says, oh, it's my dream job to work here. Well, everybody says that. Now, granted, he didn't give any cookie-cutter responses in his press conference. You could definitely tell that he was an X's and O's guy. Smitty, my hat's off to the Dolphins organization. I hope they get it turned around in the right direction. Tampa Bay lost Tom Brady. And there's a lot of people that have been lifelong fans of either Jacksonville, Tampa Bay, and Miami. That's great. I've never found a team in the NFL that I could truly find my identity in. But, Smitty, you'll be pleased to know that I think I have found a team that I could root for years to come. Now, I think this is going to shock you, Smitty, but let's go ahead and look at some of these statistics. They are in the AFC. They have 6 Super Bowls, 8 conference championships, 24 division championships, and 33 playoff appearances. Their owners have given numerous chances to coaches, 10 years plus, to implement their systems, and their coaching turnover rate is very low compared to other teams in the league. Smitty, I am going to join the Yinzer cult in Pittsburgh.
Oh my God!
Yes, sir. I have found a home, I believe, with the Pittsburgh Steelers. This one, Smitty, this one right here, I told you it was going to shock you before we started rolling. But let me just give me a chance to explain to the fans at home my identity in this team. Number one, them being the Steelers, the iron industry, the 70s, the 80s. That's kind of always been my mentality, is like the backbone and infrastructure of America, even though in the 80s, like most of the jobs were outsourced and the steel industry's kind of closed down. The colors, black and yellow, very intimidating colors. They have a great football history. The Rooneys in Pittsburgh, they've probably had 3 coaches in the last 50 years, almost 50 years, and they've gotten a Super Bowl out of every one of them. You look at Chuck Noll that come along, and in the 70s, Pittsburgh won 4 Super Bowls. Bill Cowher come along in, I want to say, the 80s, and in the 90s, they competed for 4 AFC championships. Of course, they fell short, but they competed for 4 AFC championships, ended up winning a Super Bowl with Cowher before his, Bill Cowher, to be exact, before him stepping down shortly after that. And then Mike Tomlin takes over, and they win 2 Super Bowls in 05 and in 08. So it's evident, Smitty, that the Rooneys give whatever coach they hire time to implement his system because they believe in a winning tradition. Now, somebody will say, why Pittsburgh? You're not from there. You've never been there. My stepmother is from Pennsylvania. I have a very good friend and coworker of mine who is from the city of Pittsburgh, and we've talked multiple times. I love the football history in Pittsburgh. I do like how there is the potential there, Smitty, for them to get back to that once decade of dominance. They've got 6 Super Bowls to record, tied with the Patriots. And, you know, they've already established themselves as a team. Now, granted, they're going to need a quarterback. Big Ben stepping down in the offseason. But I would argue to the fans at home that watch this and say, well, you're just going to hop somewhere else. No, this is the perfect time if you're going to pick a team, somebody like Pittsburgh, because they went the wild card. They lost to the Chiefs. I think they kind of knew that was going to happen. Now they're having to rebuild at the quarterback position. And the way things are looking, they may have to cut Chase Claypool. Juju Smith-Schuster says he wants to go play for Dallas now. He's wanting out at Pittsburgh.
Really?
Yes, Juju
Them?
Smith. Yes.
Of all teams?
Yep. Juju Smith-Schuster says he wants to go to Dallas to play for them. So they could need some wide receivers and quarterbacks. So, Smitty, it's really going to be a rebuilding few years for Pittsburgh. So you can't really say, oh, you're bandwagon, they're going to make a run to the Super Bowl. No, not anytime soon unless I'm missing something there. So, yes, I have decided to join the Pittsburgh Steelers as my team. I think I found a home with them, Smitty, good identity in them, and I'm looking forward to years and years of disappointment.
You're gonna need a lot of alcohol for that one.
Easy, man, easy. I need a terrible towel. That's what I need.
Yeah, I had to wipe away the tears.
Well, I don't know. I mean, you know, if you're a Jacksonville fan or a Dallas Cowboys fan, which I have a good friend of mine, diehard Dallas Cowboys fan, I told him, I said, man, I can't wait for Pittsburgh to go to the Super Bowl next year. He says, you should be a comedian. I said, I know, because my next joke was going to be about how the Cowboys were going to go to the Super Bowl next year. Got no response back.
Oh, yeah, well, that kind of makes sense. And the Jaguars, of all people, do they even have structure over there now?
Well, they may in the future. How about them hiring Doug Peterson I
That-
believe Philadelphia's old coach.
That kind of surprised me, in all
Yeah.
honesty. But they've also been getting some coordinators filled in as well,
Yeah.
so it should be interesting to see
Yep.
what happens there. But the draft's coming up.
Yep.
They
Got to talk.
That
drafts.
is they got to step up their game in the drafts and make some decisions.
Yep. And with the
I mean,
Dolphins.
they got the quarterback.
Yep, we know that. So just build around him, and I'd keep my eye on the Dolphins too. Smitty McDaniel got busy that first week there in Miami. I believe he brought in Wes Welker as his wide receivers coach. Brought him over from the 49ers. Brought in the tight end coach from the 49ers. So he's getting busy. He's interviewing quarterback coaches and coordinators. Now Mike McDaniel specifically stated he's going to be calling most of the plays. But he's not going to sit there and just hog that responsibility. He's going to work with a very smart offensive staff. So the Dolphins, in the next 2 or 3 years could make a run. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying it could be a long time before somebody like the Dolphins get going in the right direction.
Only time will tell.
Yep,
I
only time will
can't
tell.
believe you're Pittsburgh Steelers.
Well, let's be fair about this. I can't believe that you would consider being a Cincinnati Bengals fan. I mean, because the difference in the choices of our two teams, if I just may say so, the team I'm choosing to root for hasn't been to a Super Bowl in this decade. The last Super Bowl they went to was 2010, 2011 against Green Bay and ended up losing.
Mm-hmm.
So they haven't been back since. Your team just went to the the team you're thinking about just went to the Super Bowl
And lost.
and lost. So there's not really a whole lot of difference, Smitty. I mean,
True, but
I
they might go back. You may never know.
I think I need that ice house now.
No, you're not getting it.
All
You're not getting it.
right, guys, that's all the time we got for today. Thank you so much for making this podcast a success. Smitty, as always, thanks, man, for joining me and talking some football. We will see you guys next week.
Take it easy.